What the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. If that's true, then why do so many people crumble internally at the slightest criticism, an unexpected call, a traffic delay, or a piece of bad news? How is it possible for intelligent, capable, and determined individuals to completely lose emotional control over such trivial matters? What if the real upheaval isn't coming from the outside world, but from a lack of mastery over one's own mind? What if everything you feel today, anxiety, insecurity, stress, isn't an enemy but a signal that you haven't yet learned the power of remaining calm when everything seems to be falling apart? True strength begins the moment you realize you no longer need to react automatically to the world, because it's in that exact moment that you discover you have a choice. And that changes everything. Most people believe that strong emotions are like inevitable storms that rage within them. But the truth is, you don't have to be a leaky umbrella at the mercy of the rain. You can be the lighthouse that stands firm even when the sea goes wild. And it's curious to notice how in our daily lives, small provocations have the power to throw us off balance. All it takes is someone cutting you off in traffic, a colleague at work making a snide comment, an unexpected demand appearing, and just like that, your entire energy is hijacked. It's almost as if an invisible part of you presses a red button without asking for your permission. But that button only exists because you allowed it to exist. And when you understand this, when you realize that your mind is trainable like a muscle, everything changes. Science confirms this. Recent studies from the Harvard Business Review show that most of our emotional reactions are automatic, inherited from old patterns repeated since adolescence. It's as if the brain is always ready to defend itself, even when there's no real threat. And what's most striking is that when you react impulsively, you lose much more than just reason. You lose focus, you lose productivity, you lose opportunities. Have you ever noticed how a single mean comment can ruin your concentration for hours? How many dreams have been postponed simply because someone made you believe you were less capable? That's why emotional self-control isn't coldness. It's intelligence, it's maturity. It's the act of consciously choosing the response that keeps you whole. When Napoleon Hill studied hundreds of leaders, he noticed they all had something in common. They didn't allow themselves to be governed by the first impulse. They would breathe, analyze, and only then decide what was worth their energy. This behavior wasn't natural, it was trained, earned daily. And that's how Hill had a pivotal experience when he was still working as a reporter. Pressured to write distorted stories about influential businessmen, he had to choose between succumbing to the impulse to rebel or acting with silent resolve. He remained calm, refused sensationalism, and it was precisely this attitude that caught the attention of Andrew Carnegie. Hill's entire life changed because he decided to stay centered when everything around him seemed to demand the opposite. But what about you? How many times have you lost emotional control over things that, looking back now, had no real significance? How many times have you let a conversation eat away at you inside, carrying for days something that should have been discarded in minutes? This cycle exhausts anyone, and that's why the first pillar of unshakable calm is simple. Interrupt the impulse. If you can interrupt for half a second before reacting, you've already won. The half second of consciousness is the turning point. It's there that emotion loses its power and you take command. Now imagine applying this interval to the most common situations in your life. Someone offends you, you breathe. An unfair criticism arrives, you observe. An unexpected problem appears. You maintain a steady gaze before any word. The other person might even expect your explosion, but when it doesn't come, you change the entire dynamic. You stop being reactive and become strategic. And don't think this makes you passive. On the contrary, it makes you powerful, admired, respected. The world trusts those who remain calm when everyone else loses their heads. Notice in work meetings, family discussions, moments of crisis. The person who speaks less but speaks wisely dominates. The one who reacts less but acts more leads. Emotions stop being enemies and become compasses. You don't stop feeling, but you learn to interpret. And when you interpret, you choose. Nothing automatically drags you away anymore. Nothing pulls you away from what you truly want to build. That's why this pillar requires practice. The next time someone provokes you, before saying anything, mentally count to 5. Ask yourself if that person deserves your energy, or if they are just trying to pull you into their emotional game. Ask yourself if this reaction will bring you closer to your goals, or just reaffirm old patterns you promised to abandon. 90% of the time, you will realize that silence is more powerful than a retort, that breathing is more useful than an outburst, and that moving forward is wiser than entering the war the other person prepared. This is the beginning of inner mastery. It's the first layer of your strength. It's the kind of choice that, when repeated, reprograms your brain and builds a new emotional identity. Someone who isn't rattled by trifles, someone who isn't pulled into external chaos, someone who has finally discovered that remaining calm isn't a gift, but a continuous decision. And each time you choose this calm, the world doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. And that changes everything. The human mind creates emotional storms over situations that statistically have no real impact on the future. The Harvard Business Review has shown that we lose precious hours every day simply by dwelling on small annoyances. And you know why? Because the human brain is trained to react before analyzing. It wants to defend itself. It wants to justify itself. It wants to prove it's right. But the price of this reaction is too high. You spend energy that should be used to build your life, advance your projects, strengthen your confidence. How many times have you caught yourself carrying an irritation from morning until night, letting it contaminate your productivity, your mood, your self-esteem? And all this for something that, looking at it honestly, didn't deserve even 5 seconds of your attention. It's exactly why remaining calm is a skill that is trained and not a gift that some people have and others don't. Calm is a conscious choice. It's the decision not to let any opinion, any criticism, or any behavior of others determine how you will feel. Imagine the scene. Someone provokes you, expecting to see you explode, but you take a deep breath, observe, and don't react. That person completely loses power, because whoever masters their own reaction masters the environment. This is one of the most profound lessons that leaders like Angela Merkel applied repeatedly. At tense negotiation tables, while everyone else lost their composure, she remained unshakable, not out of coldness but out of focus. And it's this same strength that you can develop. And when you think this is too difficult, remember a real episode from Napoleon Hill's life that reveals the emotional price he himself paid before learning this lesson. During the darkest years of the Great Depression, when he saw entire families crumbling emotionally, Hill also faced his own inner fears. There was a period when he lost almost everything: financial support, security, stability, and yet he continued writing, studying, investigating the human mind. He reported in interviews that he often wrote with the feeling that everything around him was collapsing, but it was precisely in those moments that he discovered the strength of conscious calm, the inner silence that allows you to continue even when the world screams chaos. This account evokes a mix of empathy and inspiration in the audience, because it shows that even the greatest names in history faced emotional collapses and overcame them. This is the point where everything changes, because when you commit to training this skill, you realize that nothing around you needs to change for you to change. The next time something provokes you, do a simple mental experiment, almost like an emotional shield. Ask yourself if this situation has the right to steal your focus, your peace, your vital energy, and you will start to notice a pattern. 90% of the things you instinctively reacted to didn't deserve any reaction. It's here that calm transforms into power. It's here that you stop being an emotional victim and become the protagonist of your choices. And when you start applying this daily, you will notice a curious phenomenon. People begin to respect you more, not because you impose yourself, but because you are not fazed. Calm creates presence. It communicates strength without needing a word. It changes the way others see you, and, more importantly, it changes the way you see yourself. It's from here that your life begins to elevate to a new level of clarity, composure, and self-control. Because when the storm comes, and it always comes, you will no longer be dragged by it. You will traverse it, intact, steadfast, and with the certainty that nothing that tries to bring you down has more power than what you choose to uphold within yourself. When you begin to understand that silence is not an absence of reaction, but rather an absolute presence of control, something profound changes within you. It's as if suddenly you realize you always had a powerful weapon in your hands, but never knew how to use it. Silence is an emotional shield, a strategic tool, and above all, a space where you perceive what most people overlook. While the world rushes to respond, to argue, to prove a point, you choose to observe. And in that observation, everything becomes clear. Intentions, insecurities, weaknesses, and especially what truly deserves your energy and what's merely noise, attempting to drag you into an emotional battle that isn't yours. What's most striking is that the majority of people live as if silence were a sign of weakness. But statistically, studies on emotional behavior have shown that individuals who respond less and observe more have a greater capacity to make sound decisions under pressure. This happens because when you maintain your calm and attention, areas of the brain linked to rational judgment remain active, while those who lose control act impulsively, guided by emotion rather than clarity. So when you remain quiet for a few more seconds, you give your brain the opportunity to see the entire picture, while those trapped by impulse only see their own irritation. That's why so many people get lost in pointless arguments, in fights that change nothing, in immediate responses that later turn into regret. How many times have you blurted out a response in the heat of the moment and then realized you didn't need to say anything at all? How many times have you fallen into the trap of someone who merely wanted to provoke you, throw you off balance, make you react? The truth is that provocateurs don't want dialogue, they want control. And silence takes precisely that away from them. While most fall into the game, you choose the chessboard, and that choice changes everything. Napoleon Hill spoke of this inner mastery as one of the most striking characteristics of minds that achieve great results. He himself lived through situations where the only possible response was strategic serenity. At a certain point in his life, while striving to complete one of his most significant works, Hill faced adversaries who publicly criticized him, tried to discredit his methods, and repeatedly provoked him, hoping he would react and create conflicts that could tarnish his reputation. Hill, however, maintained a steady gaze and a serene demeanor. He didn't return insult for insult. He didn't answer attack with attack. He understood that responding would be falling right into the trap they had set for him. And the result? Over time, his provocateurs grew tired and disappeared, while Hill's name became a global reference in personal development. This episode evokes in the public a mixture of respect and admiration, even a touch of surprise, because it's counterintuitive to realize that not reacting can be the most powerful strategy. The truth is, when you choose silence, you're not being passive, you're taking control. You're saying without words that no one else has the power to manipulate you. Most people react because they want to prove a point, want to defend their image, want to have the last word. But the last word doesn't change outcomes. Emotional behavior does. And here's an issue that affects almost everyone. How many times have you argued over something that wouldn't change your future in the slightest? How many times have you worn yourself out emotionally over groundless comments? How many times have you sacrificed your peace to be right? What if you just let it go? What if you stayed silent and watched the other person wear themselves out while you remained composed? Imagine a work situation, an agitated colleague trying to pressure you, speak louder, impose authority through their voice. If you respond in the same tone, the discussion turns into a battle. But if you remain calm, taking a deep breath, looking them in the eye and waiting for the right moment to speak, the entire dynamic of the conversation changes. The person realizes they can't get to you. That disarms them. That flips the script. That puts you in control even if you haven't said a single word. This type of posture also has a direct impact on your financial life and decision-making. Studies show that impulsive people are more prone to spending. That leads to regret, rash decisions, and emotional behaviors that directly impact their wallet. Now think of the opposite. Someone who can wait, analyze, observe. This person has greater clarity to decide on investments, to negotiate, to identify risks, precisely because they don't react to the first impulse. This calm translates into real, tangible, measurable results. Therefore, try applying this skill in your daily life. When someone pressures you for an immediate response, breathe. When someone gives you unfair criticism, wait. When the environment tries to pull you into an argument, observe. Train this small interval of silence, this space where you think before you act. Make it a personal challenge for a few days. Choose 3 situations per day to not react. Just breathe, observe, and respond in your own time. The effect is so transformative that you'll probably be surprised by the amount of energy you save, the peace you feel, and the respect you gain. And in the end, the key takeaway is this: silence isn't empty. Silence is where your emotional mastery resides. It's where you become stronger than your surroundings, wiser than impulse, and more powerful than any provocation. When you master this space, you walk through the world with a lightness few know, and an inner strength that doesn't need to be proven because it is simply felt. Silence, when well used, isn't an absence of reaction. It's mastery. It's as if you stepped out of the emotional arena and ascended one floor above, where you see everything with greater clarity. And here's the key. Most people lose control precisely because they believe they need to respond immediately, prove something immediately, defend themselves immediately. But those who remain calm understand that by delaying the response, they gain time, gain strategy, and most importantly, gain power. There's something almost magical about observing without rushing, because while the other person wears themselves out trying to throw you off balance, you preserve your focus, your energy, your lucidity. And this doesn't mean being passive, withdrawn, or weak. It means being intelligent. The person who reacts impulsively is always one step behind circumstances, while the person who breathes, observes, and only then acts is always one step ahead. Isn't it curious that, in difficult conversations, those who maintain a steady gaze and a low voice naturally earn respect and, often, leadership of the situation? People feel this. They perceive when someone isn't rattled, doesn't despair, doesn't give in to the emotional game that most enter without thinking. And that's precisely why conscious silence becomes a powerful weapon, because it disarms, confuses, and at the same time, strengthens. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply and lived it intensely. There was a defining moment in his life that perfectly illustrates this power of not reacting amidst chaos. When he was investigating gangs and criminal organizations at the request of the American government, Hill received genuine death threats. He could have panicked. He could have reacted with despair, hidden, abandoned everything. But one specific episode stands out. Upon being confronted by criminals who tried to intimidate him, he remained calm, so calm that the group itself was unnerved. Hill describes that he realized their fear of being exposed was greater than the risk he was taking. So he observed, listened more than he spoke, and at the right moment used that advantage. This self-control saved his life. And more than that, it made him understand practically that the human being who masters their reactions commands any room they enter. This case generates in the public a clear sense of admiration and respect, because it shows that this teaching isn't just theory, it's emotional survival and, on that day, literal survival. Now imagine applying this same principle in your daily life. How many times have you fallen into the trap of responding too quickly and later regretting it? How many times did a discussion only get worse because you matched the other person's pace instead of maintaining your own? It's probable that it's more times than you'd like to admit, and that's okay. We've all done it. But that's exactly where the power of self-control lies, in realizing that you don't need to be part of that cycle anymore. Studies show that when you wait just a few seconds before responding, your capacity for rational thought increases, and your emotional impulsivity drastically decreases. This means that a mere second of silence can completely change an outcome. And when you start practicing this, the world reacts differently to you. Suddenly, criticism doesn't cut through you as it once did. Provocations lose strength. Explosive people become disoriented because they expected you to engage in their emotional game and you don't. It's as if you become an emotionally impenetrable wall, and this not only protects you, but elevates your presence. Because those who speak little and with intention have more impact than those who speak much and without direction. This is one of the greatest competencies that leaders, athletes, negotiators, and strategists share. They don't surrender their energy to the first stimulus. They choose where to spend every drop. And there's an interesting aspect. The more consciously you use silence, the more you learn about others. When you speak less, the other person speaks more, and by speaking more, they reveal their intentions, their fears, their limits. And the more you perceive this, the more emotional advantage you gain, because those who perceive first act better. Those who act better win more often. So if you want to put this teaching into practice, do the following. Over the next 3 days, practice the skill of not responding immediately, whether it's a criticism, a provocation, a demand, an argument, or even in simple situations like someone trying to rush you. Breathe, observe, and only then decide if it's worth responding or if it's better to let silence do the work for you. You'll notice something transformative. The world stops controlling you because you stop giving control away to the world. True strength isn't in winning by shouting, but in winning without needing to raise your voice. This is the kind of calm that transforms anyone into an unshakable person. And when you finally feel this power working in practice, everything around you remains noisy. But inside you, a silence is born that cannot be shaken by anything. Life doesn't demand that you control the world, it demands that you control yourself. This is the most powerful point of this video, the essence that separates those who live reacting to everything on the outside from those who learn to build peace on the inside. Because in the end, it's not the chaos that brings you down, it's how you choose to respond to it. And when that choice becomes conscious, strategic, and calm, your entire life changes direction. And speaking of direction, if you felt this content uplifted you, the next video appearing on your screen is the perfect step to continue this journey. There, you'll climb another step in your wisdom evolution and become 1% better than you were before hitting play here. Thank you for being with me so far. I truly appreciate you and look forward to seeing you in the next video.